The obsidian walls of the high synod of Ethelgard hummed with a resonant frequency that was less a sound and more a vibration in the marrow of those who stood within. It was the song of stability, of a civilization that had persisted for 30,000 rotations of their home star, untouched by the chaotic entropy of the younger universe. Here, in the Chamber of Echoes, the air was chilled to a precise, preservationist temperature, scented with the sterile ozone of high-energy shielding. High Archon Vales, his carapace shimmering with the iridescent sheen of advanced age and deep wisdom, stood before the stellar oculum, a massive, suspended sphere of liquid data that swirled with the real-time cartography of the galaxy. He did not move. Movement was a waste of energy, a sign of inefficiency that the Ethelgard had bred out of their biology millennia ago. Around him, the other members of the Synod floated in their gravity-nullified pods, a semicircle of silent judges watching the unfolding horror displayed within the oculum. They were a delicate species, the Ethelgard, tall, slender, composed of hollow bones and translucent skin, reliant on complex environmental suits whenever they left the sanctuary of their climate-controlled cities. They were masters of shielding, of gravity manipulation, of art and philosophy. They were the gardeners of the sector, pruning the weeds of barbarism and nurturing the flowers of order. But what Vales saw now was not a weed. It was a wildfire. "The trajectory is confirmed, High Archon," Fleetmaster Kael'thas intoned, his voice amplified by the synth mesh covering his mandibles. Kael'thas was the militant arm of the Synod, though even he looked upon the data with a tremor of revulsion. "The unidentified fleet designation Terran is not deviating. They are accelerating." The oculum displayed the path of the Terran vessels. There were 12 of them, colossal, ugly constructs of riveted alloy and brute force propulsion, lacking the elegant curves of Ethelgardian bioships. They spewed radiation signatures that would be considered illegal in any civilized system, trailing exhaust plumes of superheated plasma that scarred the vacuum behind them. But it was not their crudeness that horrified the Council. It was their destination. The Terran ships were heading directly into the Morrow's Rift. To the Ethelgard, and indeed to every known sapient species in the Galactic Concordance, the Morrow's Rift was a graveyard. It was a sector of space where the laws of physics seemed to twist and scream, a cluster of neutron stars, erratic pulsars, and hypergravity wells that created a maelstrom of radiation and crushing force. No ship went there. No life could sustain itself there. It was a place where the universe went to die. "They are carrying biological signatures," Vales said, his voice a low thrum of sorrow. "Millions of them." He adjusted the sensory input of the oculum, zooming in on the lead Terran vessel. It was a jagged monolith, vast and imposing, with thick ablative armor plates that looked like scar tissue. "The density of life signs in the cargo holds is catastrophic, packed together, minimal movement, high-stress biomarkers." Xenologist Alara, a scholar of primitive cultures, drifted closer, her pod humming softly. "It is a penal fleet," she whispered, the realization turning her translucent skin a pale shade of violet, the color of morning. "There is no other explanation. No rational species would enter the rift voluntarily. They are disposing of their unwanted population. They are taking them to the rift to be crushed, to be irradiated, to be erased." A ripple of psychic distress moved through the Synod. The Ethelgard valued life, even the chaotic, short-lived lives of primitives. The concept of a death march on this scale, millions of sentients being ferried into a cosmic meat grinder, was an affront to their deepest ethical axioms. "We cannot intervene in the internal affairs of a sovereign species," Counselor Nix stated, though his tone lacked conviction. "The prime directive of non-interference," Kael'thas cut him off, his pod rotating sharply. "The prime directive applies to cultural development. This is a massacre. If we allow this fleet to enter the rift, those millions will die in agony. The radiation alone will boil them within their hulls before the gravity shear tears them apart. It is not governance, it is genocide. We have the shielding technology to survive the outer rim of the rift. We have the tractor beams to stall their propulsion. We must intercept." Vales looked deep into the swirling data. He saw the terrifying readouts of the Terran ships. Their internal atmosphere was a toxic brew of nitrogen and oxygen, pressurized to levels that would crush an Ethelgardian's lungs instantly. Their gravity was set to one standard Terran, a crushing weight that would snap Vales's limbs. And yet the sensors indicated the prisoners were alive, suffering, sure. "Lie but alive." "Prepare the interdiction fleet," Vales commanded, the decision settling heavily upon him like a physical weight. We will not stand by and watch a species cast its children into the fire. We will intercept the Terran convoy. We will disable their engines, and we will demand the release of these prisoners. The chamber darkened as the oculum shifted to tactical mode. But be warned, Valles added, his eyes narrowing. A species cruel enough to build ships like that and to send their own kind to a place like the Morrow's Rift. They will not surrender their captives easily. We go not as conquerors, but as saviors. Let us hope they understand the difference. The die was cast. The Ethelgard, ancient and fragile, were moving to stop the brutes of Terra from committing an atrocity. They did not know that they were misreading the map of human nature entirely. They did not know that for humanity, the line between a prison and a playground was often defined only by the amount of adrenaline involved. The journey to the edge of the Morrow's Rift was a lesson in humility for the Ethelgardian fleet. Their ships, the White Wing, the Silent Vigil, and the flagship Celestial Arbiter, were masterpieces of engineering, gleaming teardrops of white ceramic and force fields that moved silently through the void. Yet, as they approached the rift, the turbulence of the sector buffeted them. Gravitational shear waves rattled their inertial dampeners. Radiation storms lashed against their shields, lighting up the void with ghostly auroras of violet and green. Inside the Celestial Arbiter, Valles sat in the command harness, monitoring the structural integrity fields. Shield efficiency at 84%, Kael'thas reported, tension tightening his voice. The radiation output from the rift is spiking. We are detecting gamma-ray bursts from the binary pulsars. It is madness, absolute madness. How can the Terran ships even exist in this soup? They are ahead of us, the sensor officer called out, his voice trembling. Visual contact established. On the main view screen, the Terran fleet emerged from the interference static. They were monstrous. Unlike the elegant Ethelgard ships, the Terran vessels were built like bricks, blocky, functional, and massive. They lacked the shimmering energy shields of the Ethelgard. Instead, they relied on sheer physical bulk. Meters of composite armor, lead lining, and electromagnetic fields generated by raw, churning fusion reactors. They looked less like starships and more like flying bunkers, and they were heading deeper. They were already past the point of safety, pushing into the gravity well of the nearest neutron star, a swirling eye of blue fire named by the Galactics as the Maw. They are entering the accretion disk, Alara gasped. The radiation levels there are lethal within microcycles. Their hulls are heating up. Look at the thermal scans. Indeed, the Terran ships were glowing. Their outer hulls had shifted from dull gray to a dull cherry red as they plowed through the dust and gas of the accretion disk. They are cooking them, Kael'thas snarled, his hand slamming onto his console. They are cooking the prisoners alive. Open a channel, wide spectrum, overwrite their communication protocols. The Ethelgardian Communications Array, a device capable of piercing the fiercest ion storms, blasted a message across the void, translated by the universal linguist algorithms into the guttural, barbaric tongue of Terra. Attention Terran vessels, Valles spoke, his voice projected with the authority of 10,000 years of civilization. This is High Archon Valles of the Ethelgardian Synod. You are entering a Class 10 hazard zone. Your trajectory leads to certain destruction. We have scanned your vessels and detected millions of life forms aboard. We demand you cut your engines and prepare to be boarded. We will not allow this atrocity to continue. Release your prisoners to our custody, and we will grant you safe passage out of this system. Do not resist. Silence stretched across the void. The radiation static hissed and popped on the speakers. The Terran ships did not slow down. They did not turn. They continued their dive into the hellstorm of the rift. For a long, agonizing minute, the Ethelgard believed they had been ignored or that the crew was already dead. Then the response came. It did not sound like the plea of a dying crew, nor the defiance of a prison warden. The voice was calm, almost bored, with a rhythmic, thumping background noise that sounded strangely like music. Ethelgard vessel, this is the Titan's Rest, flagship of the Royal Caribbean Interstellar Fleet. We read you 5 by 5, but you're coming in a little hot on the drama, over. The voice was deep, casual. We appreciate the concern, neighbor, but we're green across the board. We aren't detecting any distress signals. Did you guys get lost? You're drifting awfully close to the exclusionary zone. That's a restricted lane. Valles stared at the communicator. Restricted lane? He repeated, baffled. You are flying into a neutron star's gravity well. Your hulls are thermal radiating at 400 degrees. You are carrying millions of captives. Captives? The human voice chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. I think your translators are glitching, Archon. We're carrying 20,000 passengers and 5,000 crew. And yeah, the hull's hot, that's why we're here. We're hitting the gravity-breaking maneuver to swing us into the orbit of Tartarus Prime. If we stop now, we'll lose our momentum and actually fall into the star. So, we're gonna keep going. If you want to chat, feel free to follow us into orbit, but I warn you, the chop is pretty rough today. Follow them? Kael'thas looked at Vales with disbelief. They are bluffing. They are trying to lure us into the gravity crush to destroy us. Tartarus Prime, that planet is a myth, a rock of volcanic glass and hurricanes of liquid methane. Nothing lives there. They are not bluffing, Alara said softly, studying the telemetry. Look at their energy signatures. They aren't diverting power to weapons. They are diverting power to internal stabilizers, inertial dampeners, and synthetic food processors. She looked up, confusion warring with horror. High Archon, they are inviting us down. Vales made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. We will follow, but shields to maximum, weapons primed but cold. We will see this Tartarus Prime, and we will see the faces of these passengers. If this is a deception, if we find suffering, we will dismantle their fleet piece by piece. The descent was a nightmare. The Ethel Guardian ships groaned under the strain as they followed the Terran behemoths through the upper atmosphere of Tartarus Prime. The planet was a swirling marble of charcoal and blood-red clouds. Lightning arcs the size of continents flashed in the dark. The gravity was 1.5 times standard, heavy, oppressive, bone-crushing. The wind speeds were supersonic. It was a world where the very air tried to flay the skin from your bones. And yet, as the clouds parted, the Ethel Guardians saw it. It was not a prison camp, it was a citadel. Nestled in the center of a jagged crater, shielded by a dome of shimmering electromagnetic force, was a sprawling complex of metal and light. Towers of steel pierced the storm. Massive docking arms extended to receive the Terran ships. And everywhere there was movement, not the shambling of prisoners, but the purposeful, high-energy movement of machines and vehicles. The celestial arbiter docked with a groan of metallic protest, its delicate landing struts straining against the gravity. The airlock hissed. Vales, Kael'thas, and Alara stood in the airlock antechamber. They were encased in their heaviest exosuits, bulky, powered armor designed for hazardous waste cleanup or deep-sea exploration. They needed the suits to support their own weight in this crushing gravity and to filter out the toxic atmosphere. They expected to be met by armed guards, by wardens with shock batons. The airlock cycled open. The first thing that hit them was the noise. It was a roar not of pain, but of chaos, laughter, shouting, the thumping rhythm of heavy bass. They stepped out onto a wide promenade. The air, contained within the dome, was breathable for humans but smelled of ozone, sweat, and something sweet and burnt. And there were humans everywhere. But they were not in chains. They were wearing practically nothing. Strips of colorful cloth, loose garments. Some were nearly naked, their skin browned by ultraviolet exposure, and they were active, horrifyingly active. To the left, inside a transparent tube that ran along the wall, a group of humans were strapped onto boards, riding a torrent of rushing water that moved at breakneck speeds. They fell, crashed, were thrown against the padded walls, and emerged laughing, high-fiving each other. They are being waterboarded, Kael'thas whispered in horror. A torture technique, repeated drowning. No, Alara corrected, checking her scanner. They are queued up. They are waiting for their turn. They are paying credits to do this. To the right, a massive chamber with glass walls revealed a room filled with heavy iron weights. Humans, sweating and red-faced, were lifting these weights, masses that would crush an Ethel Guardian into paste, repeatedly. They grunted, their veins bulging, their faces contorted in what looked like agony. Then they dropped the weights, drank from bottles, and did it again. Forced labor, Vales surmised. Pointless Sisyphean labor to break their spirits. Excuse me. The Ethel Guardians froze. Standing before them was a human. He was immense by their standards, broad-shouldered, dense with muscle, wearing a white uniform with gold epaulets. He looked at their terrifying combat armor with a mild curiosity. I'm Captain Silas. Thorn, the human said, extending a hand. Welcome to the Titan's Rest Resort and Adventure Park. Sorry about the heat. The AC in the docking bay is struggling a bit with the magma vents flaring up outside. Can I get you guys a drink? Maybe a protein shake? Or are you here for the Zero-G MMA tournament? Vales stared at the hand. He looked at Kael'thas, who was trembling with confusion. He looked at the humans in the background, who were currently cheering as one of their own jumped off a platform with a rope tied to his ankles, plummeting toward a jagged pit before bouncing back up. Captain Thorne, Bailey said, his voice synthesized and metallic. We came to rescue your prisoners. Thorne blinked, then a slow, confused smile spread across his face. Prisoners? Oh, you mean the guests. They are suffering, Kael'thas insisted, pointing a manipulator arm at the weight room. Look at them, they are straining, tearing their muscle fibers, they are in pain. Thorne looked at the gym. Oh yeah, leg day, it's a killer, but they love it. Gotta get the gains right. Gains? Alara asked, her translator failing to provide a context. Hypertrophy, strengthening the biology through microtrauma, Thorne explained nonchalantly. Look, why don't we go to my office? It's quieter, and I can explain why we bring our people to a radioactive hellhole for fun. The walk to the office was a journey through a gallery of horrors that the humans called recreation. They passed a room where humans sat in wooden boxes filled with steam, the temperature nearing the boiling point of water. Sauna, Thorne explained. Detox. They passed a combat arena where two humans were punching each other in the face while wearing padded gloves, surrounded by a screaming crowd. Boxing. Good cardio. They saw a child, a human larva, clinging to a vertical wall of rock, pulling itself up with no safety net. Rock climbing builds character. By the time they reached the office, which overlooked the swirling methane storms outside the dome, Valles felt a profound sense of vertigo. The world was inverted. Pain was pleasure. Danger was leisure. The morrow's rift, the graveyard of stars, was a tourist trap. Please sit, Thorne said, gesturing to chairs that were far too large and sturdy for the Ethel Guardians. They remained standing. Thorne sat behind a desk made of real wood, leaning back. So, you guys thought this was a penal colony, I get it. We get that a lot from the more delicate species. Delicate, Kael'thas bristled. We are the architects of the concordance, we have mastered the stars. Sure, Thorne agreed easily. You've mastered the safe stars, the quiet ones, but here's the thing about humans. We didn't evolve in a garden, we evolved on a death world. Earth, it tries to kill us every day. Viruses, tectonic shifts, hurricanes, predators, our own weather. We survived because we're stubborn. And because we realized something early on, comfort is a slow death. Thorne leaned forward, his expression shifting from casual host to something sharper, colder. You see this place, Tartarus Prime? The gravity is 1.5 GS. The radiation background is high, the air pressure is heavy, it's hostile, and that's why we're here. We aren't just vacationing, High Archon, we're hardening. Hardening, Valles asked. Against what? The galaxy is at peace, the concordance ensures it. Thorne sighed, tapping a command on his desk. The windows darkened and a holographic map appeared. But it wasn't the galaxy Valles knew. It was a map of the outer rim, the dark space beyond the reach of the concordance's sensors. The galaxy is a garden, yes, Thorne said softly. But gardens have walls, and outside those walls there's a jungle. You guys. You sit in your climate-controlled ships with your shields and your treaties, and you think the universe cares about your laws. It doesn't. The map zoomed in on a sector of dark space. There was a cloud there, a massive, shifting shadow that seemed to be devouring the stars behind it. We call them the entropy eaters, Thorne said. Or just the scourge. Our deep-range probes found them 50 years ago. They don't negotiate, they don't trade, they consume. They are a hive mind swarming from the galactic void, stripping systems of energy and biomass. They live in high-gravity, high-radiation environments. They thrive in the conditions that kill you. Valles stared at the shadow. He had heard rumors, ghost stories from the edge of space, but he had dismissed them as sensor glitches. And you are fighting them. Not yet, Thorne said, but we will be. And when they come, your shields won't work. Your energy weapons will be absorbed. The only thing that will stop them is kinetic force, physical resilience, the ability to fight in a gravity well that would crush a cruiser, the ability to keep moving when your skin is blistering and your bones are fracturing. Thorne stood up, and for the first time, Valles are. Eli's the sheer predatory grace of the human. We bring our civilians here to these resorts to keep the species strong. We treat high-gravity training as a sport so that our children don't forget how to struggle. We treat combat as a game so that when the war comes, we don't freeze. We make pleasure out of pain because in the end, that's the only way to survive the universe. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the distant thunder of the methane storm outside. Kael'thas, the militant, the warrior of the Ethelgard, looked at the human with a newfound emotion. It was not fear exactly. It was awe. You are not prisoners, Kael'thas whispered. You are soldiers, all of you, even the ones drinking the colorful liquids with umbrellas in them. Especially them, Thorn grinned. That's the hammer cocktail, 90% ethanol. It kills brain cells, but hey, it keeps the liver on its toes. Valles looked out the window. He saw the humans outside, running in the storm in exosuits, racing vehicles over razor-sharp obsidian ridges. He saw a species that had looked into the abyss and decided to build a theme park in it. The Scourge, Valles said, his voice trembling slightly. How long until they reach the Concordance borders? Estimates say 20 years, Thorn replied. Maybe less. We've been building up the perimeter. These prison ships you saw, they're heavy haulers. We're dropping listening posts and bunker worlds all along the Morrow's Rift. This isn't just a vacation spot. It's a fortress disguised as a playground. Alara floated forward. You knew we would come, she realized. You knew the sensors would pick up the fleet. You wanted us to see this. Thorn nodded. We need allies, not to fight. We know you guys aren't built for the mud and the blood. We need logistics. We need your shield tech to protect the agri-worlds so we can feed our armies. We need your science to help us refine our weapons. But we needed you to understand what we are first. We aren't the barbarians you thought we were. We're the dogs guarding the house, and the wolves are coming. Valles felt a shift in his understanding of the universe. The Ethelgard had always believed that civilization was the process of removing hardship. They had strived for millennia to create a perfect, painless existence, and in doing so they had made themselves soft. They had become porcelain, beautiful, perfect, and easily shattered. Humans, on the other hand, were iron, crude, rusting, heavy, but unbreakable. We judged you, Valles said slowly. We thought you cruel, but you are simply prepared. Cruelty is pointless, Thorn said. Hardship is necessary, there's a difference. The door to the office opened, and a young human woman walked in. She was wearing a bandage around her knee and walked with a slight limp, but she was smiling broadly. She carried a tray with glasses of water. Captain, the Gravity Ball finals are starting. The Titans' rest team is up against the Void Walkers. Thanks, Sarah, Thorn said. He looked at the Ethel Guardians. You guys want to watch? It's brutal. Last year 3 people broke ribs. It was great. Valles looked at Kael'thas. The Fleetmaster straightened his carapace. I would be intrigued to see this Gravity Ball, purely for tactical analysis, of course. Of course, Thorn smiled. As they walked back through the complex, the atmosphere felt different to the Ethel Guardians. The screams of the weightlifters no longer sounded like torture, they sounded like defiance. The heat of the saunas no longer felt like execution chambers, they felt like forges. The humans were not suffering, they were sharpening themselves. They reached the observation deck of the arena. Below, in a pit of padded steel, 2 teams of humans clad in armor were colliding with the force of small vehicles, fighting over a heavy metal sphere. The crowd roared, a sound that vibrated the glass. Valles watched them. He saw the violence, the joy, the raw, unfiltered vitality of it, and he realized that the Ethelgard had been wrong about the Great Filter. They had thought the filter was a test of intelligence, of diplomacy, but the universe was a dark forest, filled with things that hungered. The filter was a test of strength. Captain Thorn, Valles said, his voice firm, the Ethelgardian Synod will consider an alliance. We have much to discuss regarding the Scourge, and, perhaps, we have some technology that can assist with your gains. Thorn laughed, a deep, booming sound that seemed to chase away the sterile silence that usually surrounded the Archon. Glad to hear it, Valles. Welcome to the party. The game below ended with a bone-jarring tackle. The crowd erupted. One of the players limped off the field, grinning, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. Are they, Alara hesitated, are they happy? They're alive, Thorn said, looking at his people with fierce pride. And as long as we can bleed. We can fight, that's the human way. A sudden alert blared through the station, a harsh, rhythmic siren that cut through the noise of the crowd. The lights in the arena shifted from white to a pulsing crimson. The laughter died down instantly, replaced by a tense, disciplined silence. Thorn's expression shifted instantly. The casual host vanished, the soldier appeared, he tapped his earpiece. Thorn here, report. Contact, a voice crackled over the speakers, audible to the Ethel Guardians. Deep-range sensors. Sector 7G just beyond the rift. It's not a scout this time, Captain, it's a Swarmlord class, and it's bringing friends. The blood drained from Alara's face. The Scourge. Thorn nodded grimly. He turned to the Ethel Guardians. Looks like you boys picked a hell of a day for a visit. The training wheels are coming off. He hit a button on the console. All hands, this is the captain. Condition red. This is not a drill. Vacation S over, folks. Get to your battle stations. Initiate the Tartarus defense protocol. Below them, the transformation was instantaneous. The athletes in the arena stopped celebrating. They didn't panic. They didn't scream. They simply nodded, helped their injured teammates up, and sprinted toward the exits. The people in the gyms dropped their weights and grabbed rifles from lockers that popped open from the walls. The children in the climbing area were ushered efficiently into hardened bunkers by calm, professional adults. The resort was shedding its skin. The panels of the walls retracted to reveal gun emplacements. The pleasure domes armored up, heavy blast shields slamming into place. Valles watched in stunned silence. It had taken his people 3 days to mobilize the interdiction fleet. The humans had transitioned from a party to a war footing in 30 seconds. "You're going to fight them here?" Kael'thas asked, watching the displays as the human ships in orbit broke formation and formed a defensive wall. "We don't run," Thorn said, checking a heavy pistol at his side. "We picked this system for a reason. The gravity well of the neutron star, it screws with their navigation. It evens the playing field. We're going to drag them into the mud and beat them to death with experience." He looked at Valles. "Your ship is fast, Archon. You can make it out if you leave now. The exclusionary zone is still open." Valles looked at the tactical map. He saw the red swarm approaching, millions of entities, a tide of consumption. Then he looked at the humans. They were outnumbered. They were outgunned. But they were standing their ground on a radioactive rock, holding weapons made of lead and steel, ready to spit in the eye of God. The Ethelgard were fragile. They were old, but they were not cowards. "Fleetmaster Kael'thas," Valles said, his voice ringing with a strength he hadn't felt in centuries. "Signal the fleet. Bring the Celestial Arbiter into a support orbit behind the Titan's Rest. Link our shield generators to their grid. We cannot fight in the mud with them, but we can hold the umbrella while they work." Kael'thas's mandibles clicked, a smile. "Acknowledged, High Archon, shield emitters powering up, targeting matrix synchronized with Terran command." Thorn looked at them, surprised. Then he nodded, a sharp, respectful dip of his head. "All right then, let's show these ugly bastards why you don't interrupt a human's vacation." The view screen filled with the image of the darkness approaching. It was vast, terrifying, and endless. But against the backdrop of the neutron star, the jagged, ugly, defiant silhouettes of the human ships stood firm, now glowing with the shimmering, elegant light of Ethelgardian shields. "Dear advanced species," Thorn muttered to himself as the first kinetic rounds were loaded into the mass drivers, the vibration shaking the floor plates. "Those prison ships, they're our pleasure cruises, and this death trap, this is our home turf." The first wave of the scourge hit the gravity well, and the human fleet opened fire. The silence of the void was shattered by the thunder of a species that had turned survival into an art form. And in the center of the command deck, surrounded by the chaos of war, High Archon Valles watched the humans fight, and for the first time in 10,000 years he did not feel despair. He felt the thrill of the storm. The battle for the Morrow's Rift had begun, and humanity was having the time of their lives. The initial clash was not a graceful dance of starships, but a brutal, grinding impact. The Scourge vessels were biological horrors, living ships of chitin and flesh, fueled by the consumption of matter. They did not fire lasers, they spat streams of acid and launched boarding pods that looked like ticks the size of buildings. They relied on overwhelming numbers, swarming their prey until the defenses failed. But they had never fought humans in a gravity well before. As the Scourge swarm entered the effective range of the RI-FT, the gravity of the neutron star grabbed them. Their biological propulsion systems, evolved for the drift of deep space, struggled against the shear. They slowed, bunched up. "Now," Thorn barked. The Terran fleet unleashed a wall of metal. Railguns, mass drivers, missile batteries. It was primitive compared to Ethelgardian disruption beams, but it obeyed Newton's laws. Force equals mass times acceleration, and the humans were throwing a lot of mass very, very fast. The front line of the Scourge evaporated. Chitin shattered. Biological hulls ruptured, spilling frozen fluids into the void. "Direct hits across the board," the tactical officer yelled. "Their formation is breaking. They can't maneuver in the gravity." "Keep hitting them," Thorn ordered. "Don't let them stabilize. Valles, how are those shields holding?" "We are struggling," Valles replied, his hands flying across the holographic interface. The Ethelgardian ships were pouring their energy reserves into the Terran grid. The acid attacks are draining our capacitors, but we are holding. Your armor is surprisingly effective at mitigating the bleed-through. It's a bladed tungsten, Thorn grunted. It's meant to melt, just keep the big stuff off us. The battle raged for hours. On the surface of Tartarus Prime, the ground-based defense cannons, disguised earlier as decorative spires, thundered rhythmically, sending shells up into the orbit. The humans on the station were not idle. Damage control teams, comprised of the same people who had been lifting weights and running obstacle courses hours ago, moved with practiced efficiency. They patched hull breaches, fought fires, and reloaded the massive cannons. It was during the lull of the third wave that the twist revealed itself. "Captain," the sensor officer called out, his voice dropping an octave. "We're picking up a signal not from the Scourge, from inside the rift." Thorn froze. Inside the rift. Nothing's inside the rift except the star and the crushed depth. "It's a transmission," the officer insisted. "High-band frequency, it's encoded in Terran naval cipher, but it's old, archaic." "Put it on speakers." Static filled the bridge, followed by a voice that sounded like it was coming from the bottom of a well. "This is the UNSC Dreadnought Persephone. Designation Lost Hope to any human vessel. We have held the line. Containment is failing. The gate is opening." The bridge went silent. "The Persephone," Thorn whispered. "That ship was lost during the first expansion 200 years ago. They said it suffered a drive failure and fell into the rift." "They didn't fall," Valles said, his eyes widening as he analyzed the signal. "They are transmitting from inside the event horizon of the neutron star. That is impossible, unless they aren't in our space-time anymore," Alara finished. "Captain, the Scourge. They aren't just invading from deep space, they are being pushed." The tactical map updated. The Scourge swarm wasn't attacking, it was fleeing. Behind them, emerging from the distortion of the neutron star itself, was something else, something geometric. Massive structures of light and silence were unfolding from the gravity well. "The ancient enemy," Kelthos breathed. "The myths of the Ethelgard speak of them, the architects of silence, they who prune the galaxy of noisy life." The Scourge were merely the rats running from the fire. The real threat had just kicked down the door. Thorn looked at the screen. The new ships were beautiful, terrifyingly symmetrical, and dwarfened even the Terran behemoths. "So," Thorn said, his voice low, "the Scourge was just the warm-up." He turned to Valles. "Archon, it looks like we're going to need a bigger alliance. Can you talk to these architects?" "They do not talk," Valles said, terror gripping his heart. "They delete." Thorn set his jaw. He looked at his crew. He looked at the resort station below, where thousands of humans stood ready, not with despair, but with that grim, insane determination that defined their species. "Well," Thorn cracked his knuckles, "if they want to delete us, they're going to have to format the drive first, and I promise you, we are the nastiest virus this galaxy has ever seen." He opened a fleet-wide channel. "Attention all hands. New contact. Designation Level Omega. It looks like the boss fight is starting early. Reload the mains, overcharge the reactors, and someone get me a protein shake. It's going to be a long night." As the architects of silence advanced, a strange thing happened. The Scourge, trapped between the humans and the architects, turned. They realized that the humans, with their kinetic fury and their unbreakable will, were not prey. They were a wall, and the Scourge, in a desperate bid for survival, moved behind the human fleet. "They are forming up on our flank," the tactical officer said, incredulous. "The Scourge, they're using us as cover." "Then, am I of my enemy?" Thorn muttered. "Fine, we'll kill them later. Right now we focus on the geometry teachers." The combined fleet of Terra, the Ethelgard, and the remnant Scourge stood against the unfolding light. It was a chaotic, impossible alliance. The fragile, the brutal, and the consuming, united by the sheer refusal to be extinguished. Valles looked at Thorn. The human was smiling. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a predator that had finally found something big enough to hunt. "This is why we came to the Hell Worlds," Thorn said to the Archon. "This is why we lift the heavy stones. This is why we swim in the ice. Because one day the universe throws a mountain at you, and you have to be ready to catch it." The first beam from the architects lashed out, a lance of pure entropy. The Ethelgardian shields flared white, holding for a fraction of a second before the Terran armor took the hit, glowing, melting, but holding. "Fire!" Thorn roared. And the humans, the children of the death world, the tourists of the abyss, fired back. They fired not with magic, but with defiance. They fired with the weight of their history, the strength of their struggles, and the absolute, unyielding certainty that they would not go quietly into the night. The galaxy held its breath, the silence was broken, and the party on Tartarus Prime was just getting started.